When Malika Odie's aunt passed away, she was left with nothing but a rough black patch of basalt rock on the edge of the Neanda Plains. Everyone laughed. Dead rock, they called it. Some even said she was wasting her time keeping it. But Malika didn't listen. She started digging, not for gold, but for information. She pulled old cadastral maps and studied every line. That's when she spotted it. The government had approved a brand new solar transmission corridor, and the only way it could cross was right through her rocky strip. Developers came knocking with a quick, low offer. Her own family told her to take the money before it vanished. But Malika smiled and shook her head. She wanted more than a one-time payment. She asked for a fee for every megawatt passing through, a share of the microgrid's profits, and a maintenance contract for years to come. They pushed back, but she held her ground. On closing day, the deal finally went through. The transfer hit her account. More than most of them would see in years. The same relatives who once laughed at her dead rock sat silent, watching her sign the papers with a grin. Malika didn't just inherit land. She inherited the patience to see value where others saw nothing. And that dead rock? It turned into a living, steady stream of income that would outlast every joke they ever made. When Kasi Adegbo's father passed away, all he got was a rusted old ferry slip at the far edge of Mbeal Harbor. The wood was rotting, the metal bolts were eaten by salt, and the whole place smelled of seaweed and old fuel. His cousins shook their heads. "It's a money sink," they told him. "Just scrap it before it collapses into the water." But Kasi didn't rush. He had grown up around boats and knew that sometimes the ugliest dock could be the most valuable spot in a busy harbor. He started small. The first thing he did was restore the safety markers, repainting them in bright colors so they were visible from far out. Then he repaired the ladders and reinforced the pilings so they could handle heavy boats. He went through the old filing cabinet in the office and found decades of dusty mooring logs. Instead of tossing them, he scanned and digitized every page. It was slow work, but Kasi wanted perfect records. That's when he noticed something strange buried deep in an old contract. A dormant clause that said if the island shuttle route ever came back, his slip had the first right to handle it. Months later, the Maritime Authority announced the revival of the shuttle route. Almost immediately, a powerful ferry syndicate tried to push him aside, offering to take over his slip for a small payout. But Kasi had his trump card, those spotless, time-stamped digital records and the original contract with the first refusal clause. He presented them at the meeting like a lawyer presenting evidence in court. There was no way around it. The harbor authority had to honor the agreement. Not only did Kasi keep control of the ferry slip, but he negotiated a concession deal that gave him a share of every ticket sold and every ton of cargo that passed through. The first morning of the new service, he stood at the edge of the pier watching the ferries line up, passengers loading and unloading, goods being rolled down ramps. The sound of engines and gulls mixed with the smell of fresh diesel, and for Kasi, it was the sound of victory. The same cousins who used to laugh at him now walked past in silence, counting the boats in the queue. They could see the crew handing Kasi his daily reports and the payments landing in his account like clockwork. What they had called a money sink had turned into a golden slipway. Kasi didn't just inherit a piece of rust, he inherited a chance to outthink everyone, and he took it. Now, every time another ferry ties up to his dock, it's not just a boat arriving, it's proof that patience, preparation, and knowing the rules can turn a joke into a fortune. When Amat Sege inherited an old tea dryer on the slopes of Ruma Hills, her family could barely stop laughing. The plant had been shut for years, its roof rusted, the machinery covered in dust. "What are you going to do with that?" her cousins teased. "Maybe turn it into a chicken coop." But Amma didn't laugh along. She saw more than a broken building. She saw an opportunity hiding in plain sight. She spent weeks walking through the plant, inspecting every part. The dryers were outdated and expensive to run, but the structure was solid. Instead of trying to compete in the crowded tea market, Amma decided to pivot. She started talking to farmers who grew specialty herbs, things like lemongrass, hibiscus, and chamomile. These crops could be dried and sold for higher prices, especially in the export market. She replaced the old, power-hungry machines with low-energy dryers that worked faster and used less fuel. While going through old paperwork, Alma found something unexpected. A cooperative pact from decades ago. It allowed local producers to band together and access premium export pricing during drought years, when supply elsewhere dropped. The agreement was still valid, and Alma quietly revived it. She began building relationships with farmers, promising them better rates and faster turnaround. Then, the weather shifted. A heat wave hit the region, crushing tea and herb supplies in neighboring countries. Buyers who were desperate for products started calling. They needed large quantities and they needed them fast. Alma's upgraded plant was ready. Trucks arrived, loaded with herbs from cooperative members, and the dryers ran day and night. Orders flew out the door at premium prices. Not everyone was happy about her success. One of her uncles, who had once called her dryer stupid, tried to interfere. He attempted to redirect her contracts to his own contacts. But when the notary checked the paperwork, it was clear everything was in Alma's name. The contract stayed with her. She signed multi-season supply deals with some of the biggest buyers, locking in premium rates for years. The same people who had laughed now watched her bank account grow while her useless plant worked non-stop. The building that once sat silent and abandoned had become a hub of trade and a steady source of income. Every time Alma walked past the humming dryers, she felt a quiet satisfaction. The family punchline had turned into a business that kept money flowing in no matter the season. The stupid dryer had proved smarter than anyone imagined, especially the ones who had joked the loudest. When Jabari Cohn's father's will was read, he didn't get farmland or a shop like some of his cousins. Instead, he was left with a strange, thin triangle of land wedged under the massive concrete of the Ogun Crossway. It was a strip so narrow you could walk from one side to the other in just a few steps. It sat in constant shade, surrounded by roaring traffic overhead. The moment his family saw it, the jokes started. "Maybe you can open a shadow market," one cousin laughed. "Or rent it to rats," another added. To everyone else, it was a useless piece of land. But Jabari wasn't so sure. He started researching, spending late nights reading about city development and public transit projects. That's when he learned something important. The city's new bus rapid transit system was being expanded, and part of the plan included certified micro-hubs for power and data, small, secure spots where infrastructure could be placed. The perfect locations. Unused slivers of land near major roads. Exactly like his useless triangle. A media group noticed the location too and offered him a tiny sum to put up a billboard. His family told him to take it before the land just sat empty forever. But Jabari refused. He knew it was worth more. Instead, he reached out to a data services company that needed a micro-hub along the new bus route. After several meetings, they agreed to a ground lease. Not only would he get steady rent, but also throughput royalties, meaning the more data that passed through their equipment, the more Jabari earned. Once the hub was installed, Jabari still had space above. He went back to the media group and this time, offered them the top of the hub for a legal billboard. They agreed, and now he had two income streams on the same tiny triangle of land. When the first payment started arriving, Jabari didn't say much. But at the next family gathering, someone pointed out the big, bright billboard glowing under the overpass and the discreet but vital data hub humming below it. The laughter stopped. People started asking, "Wait, that's your land?" The thin triangle that once drew endless jokes had become a steady monthly dividend. Jabari had turned shade into profit, proving that even the smallest and strangest piece of land can be valuable if you know how to see its potential. When Zanil Gumbai's mother passed away, she inherited a wide stretch of soggy, green-brown land in the Mtoni Delta. It wasn't a beach. It wasn't farmland. It was a salt marsh, mud, water, and dense mangroves tangled like giant roots reaching for the sky. Her cousins couldn't stop laughing. "You bought a swamp without knowing it," one said. Another joked, "Maybe you can start a mosquito farm." But Sunil didn't laugh. She had read enough to know that wetlands weren't worthless, they were powerful carbon sinks. The first thing she did was map every inch of the parcel using a drone and GPS, marking the healthiest mangroves and water channels. She then applied to register the land for blue carbon credits, special credits given to areas that trap and store carbon in coastal ecosystems. It took paperwork, fees, and plenty of patience, but once it was approved, the marsh officially had measurable value. Next, Sunil designed a boardwalk setback. A raised wooden path far enough from the most sensitive zones to protect the wildlife but close enough for visitors to experience the beauty of the delta. She leased a section of the frontage to a small eco-tour company that wanted to bring groups in for birdwatching, mangrove walks, and nature photography. Not long after, an airline alliance was looking for verified carbon offsets to meet new environmental rules. They saw Sunil's registered marsh and offered to pre-purchase her carbon credits for several years, with an agreement that if the biomass of the mangroves grew, the payments would increase. It was a steady income, locked in. Then a luxury resort being built down the coast came calling. They wanted exclusive access to her boardwalk for guided tours and sunset walks. Sunil agreed, but only if they paid an annual access fee and followed her conservation rules to the letter. They signed. Family dinners changed. The same cousins who once joked about her swamp now listened as she talked about credit markets, conservation contracts, and projected earnings. The laughter had faded, replaced by curious questions. The marsh wasn't just funding her, it was funding her future. Every time Sunil walked along the boardwalk, she looked at the mangroves swaying in the tide and the herons stepping slowly through the water. To her, they weren't just beautiful, they were the reason her swamp had become a living, growing bank account. When Imani Okoro's uncle passed away, she inherited what looked like nothing more than a rusty, bent radio mast on a patch of ground just outside Tamba Exchange. The paint was peeling, the cables were frayed, and the base leaned ever so slightly like it had been in a small storm years ago. Her relatives took one look and laughed. "That's not an inheritance, that's scrap metal," one cousin said. Another joked, "Maybe you can sell it for the price of a chicken." But Imani didn't rush to tear it down. She knew that in a world where everything runs on connectivity, even an old mast could hold value. Her first move was to check the paperwork. She discovered the mast still had an existing broadcast license, one that could be updated rather than started from scratch. She went through the process of regularizing it, making sure every form, inspection, and fee was taken care of. Once the license was secure, she hired a small crew to repair the structure, straighten the tilt, replace worn cables, and paint the frame to prevent further rust. Around that time, the city announced a huge cultural festival that would bring in thousands of visitors. Local telecoms were scrambling to set up extra coverage for the area, especially in high-demand spots near transport hubs like Tamba Exchange. Imani reached out and offered her mast for temporary spectrum leasing to run extra small cell equipment during the festival. They agreed. For a week, her mast hummed with activity, carrying signal for thousands of calls, texts, and streams. The telecom recorded flawless uptime and excellent performance. A few weeks later, they came back, not just for another short-term lease, but with an offer for a long-term agreement to use the site as a permanent micro-cell. Imani kept full ownership of the mast. She negotiated a deal that included not only steady monthly rent but also the right to lease a small equipment shelter on the property to other companies. What had once been scrap was now earning her money every month, without her having to climb a single rung of the tower. The next time her family gathered, her cousins didn't joke. Instead, they asked how she had turned a bent stick into a reliable stream of income. Imani just smiled. She knew the answer was simple, she had seen potential where everyone else saw junk. Now, every time she passed the mast, she didn't see rust and bolts, she saw a steady signal, carrying money straight into her account. When Kwame Diarra's father's will was read, he got a single dry acre at Lutuli Ridge. No crops, no trees, just dusty ground with an old borehole permit buried in the paperwork. His cousins called it his bucket farm and joked about sending him water in the mail. But Kwame didn't laugh. He went straight to the site, opened the borehole records, and tested the water yield. To his surprise, the flow was steady and clean. He restored the old meters, repaired the pump, and applied for sanitation funding to install taps for the surrounding community. Soon, local families were filling their buckets from his land, and he was quietly building a track record of responsible water management. Then something happened that changed everything. A large beverage company announced plans to build a bottling plant uphill from his acre. They needed a pipeline to bring water down, and the only gravity-friendly route cut directly across Kwame's license strip. They came to him with an offer. A one-time payment for access. His family told him to take it before they found another way. But Kwame had learned the value of patience. Instead of selling, he proposed a per-liter servitude. They could use the land for the pipeline, but they would pay him for every liter that passed through, plus they would handle all maintenance at their expense. After some back and forth, they signed. Now the bucket farm brings him regular payments that pop up in his account like clockwork. The same group chat that once roasted him now lights up with receipt notifications. Kwame just smiles. His acre of dry land turned out to be a well that never runs dry.